6:30 Eastern is when Super Bowl 57 starts. Coverage begins at 1 Eastern. The pregame show will be epic. Calling the game, Kevin Burkhardt, Greg Olsen, who had a spectacular year for Fox. These Super Bowls, I say Bill Romanowski told me he did not remember the first two series of his first Super Bowl. He said it was lights, and he goes, I almost passed out. And that's Bill Romanowski. You've been in spots like this. You know these games. I do worry a little about Nick Sirianni first time, Jalen Hurts. It's a thing. These are the halftime's longer. The breaks are longer. You get here for 4 hours. Little anxiety there?
I think it's so funny you bring that up because we actually talked to Sirianni a little bit about it yesterday in our production meeting. Looking back on our experience, so often NFL coaches want to make everything normal, right? We just treat every game as the same. It's kind of the coach speak and kind of cliche. I think for the Super Bowl, you have to almost lean into it. It is going to be different. Let's prepare as such. Let's not ignore halftimes longer. Let's not ignore the pregame festivities with the anthem and the flyovers and all that is not longer. Commercial breaks. You would run out there in a traditional game. You'd run out there and you'd stand for a minute and a half, take a stretch, squirt a water bottle. Referee gives you a 30-second count and you come back. It's 4 or 5 minutes. You're standing in the middle of the stadium, not a ton of energy. Like, all that stuff is real. I think the teams that don't shy away, they don't ignore it, they don't pretend it's not different, they lean in, I think they do better handling, like you said, the weirdness and the surreal nature that is the Super Bowl experience.
I know Philadelphia's D-line is good, but let me push back a little, is that they faced a lot of B and C quarterbacks who trailed late and had to throw. So they pinned their ears back. They didn't trail a lot. So as you know, as a defensive lineman, if I know Davis Webb has to throw, I'm coming hard.
Yeah.
It's Patrick Mahomes. He may lead. I am not saying the defensive line isn't great, but I do feel like we're putting him in the Mean Joe Green Steeler category, and this could be a different game, Greg. They could trail. They have to play the run. They can't come screaming off the edge. My takeaway, and you've watched the film, is the underrated unit in this game is the Chiefs' O-line.
No question. I think you were in our meeting because I think you just summed up my open to the broadcast. I think this entire game comes down to, if you're Kansas City, you don't want to fall behind. That's Philly's whole MO. We go for it on fourth down. This whole notion that they're a running team is just not true. They are a great running team because they're winning so much in the second half and they just beat you to death. And then those pass rushers pin their ears back and just get after you and all hell breaks loose. That's their formula. So how do you do it? You flip it on its head. You have the best player in the world. You have one of the best offensive minds, head coach in the world for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think they come out of the gates flying. I think they're fast. They're passing on early downs. They're going for fourth downs. They've got to keep the pedal to the metal now and don't let Jalen Hurts and this Philadelphia Eagles defense play their formula. The formula you just mentioned is how they've made their hay. Now, if that's not successful and you can't do that, you have one of 5 guys, maybe if I'm being generous, in the league who operating from behind, operating in third and long, operating in third and pass, which is what the entire league is trying to stay out of.
Yeah.
They have one of 3 to 5 guys in the league who's just as efficient in all of those down and distances. That's why he's the MVP. So I think their formula to win might be a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
Their path to victory might be a little more limited than Philly. They can win a little bit more different styles. But when you have the best player in the world playing quarterback, I think the entire game goes through him. He's got to throw the ball 40 times.
So let me compare Philadelphia a little to your Carolina team.
I think it's totally fair.
Okay. A capable thrower, but a great athlete at quarterback. Playing with unbelievable emotion, a lot of blowouts. Had not had a lot of adversity in the regular season. When Jalen Hurts starts, they lead. Let's take the Minshew games out. Then you get into a Super Bowl. Whoa, we got a fumble. We trail. We don't get a call. Do you see a little, because your team, like Philadelphia, played like almost a college team.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. When we met with Shane Steichen earlier in the year before the Christmas Eve game down in Dallas, when we were talking, kind of on the field before the game, and I said, I see so much similarity, both scheme-wise, personnel, of course, being driven by that style of quarterback, comparing Jalen to what we were able to do with Cam with the design runs and the RPO and still the ability to push the ball vertical. Their big difference is those guys on the outside, right? To have those two weapons with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown on the outside, that's the difference maker of what makes this animal a little bit different defending Philly. But I think your point is right. We had a very clear formula to win, and so does Philly, which goes back to your previous question. If Kansas City can disrupt that formula, if Kansas City cannot play into the hands of this Philly team, fall behind, get into must pass, and chase points all game, if you don't find yourself, can Philly win the other version of the game? I think that's what everyone's dying to know. No one's been able to really do it. So it's easy for us to sit here and say it.
Right.
Yeah, no one wants Philly to take the opening drive down and score a touchdown, but they've done it 11 times.
Yeah.
It's easier. It's one thing to say it. You got to go out and stop what's probably the best roster in the entire league.
So I've heard some 49er players, even a kicker, Robbie Gould. So like everybody, when the kicker starts talking trash, And so there's a lot of people I've heard Brandon Ayuk say, listen, there's holes in that Philly defense. Now I look at that and I think, I don't know, their corners are pretty good, their D-line's good. Everybody's got a vulnerability. Chiefs are very young on the back end. Snead is going to play, which is really good news, but they're a little young on the back end. Young guys can get confused. Is there something you see about Philly's defense, because they have not played a litany of Hall of Fame quarterbacks, hasn't been exposed, but Kansas City could get there?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say there's any holes per se, right? I don't think when you look at the roster, when you look at the talent at all three levels, they're very talented. They're one of the most talented groups in the entire league. Now, they've had the luxury, everything we've said up until this point about the style of games they're used to playing, where don't let them throw the ball over your head, deep shells in the games like against New York where they felt really good about their corner matchups and they can get up, play man. That's when they really get good because they weren't really scared of New York's passing game and some of the weapons they had. A little bit of a different animal now playing Kansas City. You want to play man? Who's matching up with Travis Kelce in the slot? You putting a corner on him, you moving Bradbury inside. So that gets a little dicey. If the game is close and Mahomes can use his underneath passing game, he can use Kelce in the middle of the field. Their shallow crossing game, 1 to 9 yards, they are the most efficient passing game in the league, and that's actually where Philadelphia is not as good. But when you're winning by 2 scores in the second half, you don't have to be good, right? You're almost trading being vulnerable in those areas because all I'm saying is you can't let them go 40 in one play. So there's a little bit of situational kind of awareness that plays into some of these stats. They've got to keep the game close, screens, short passing game, use McKinnon out of the backfield. Of course, Kelsey's going to get his. That formula for Kansas City is completely different than when they had Tyreek, but they do it better than anybody in the league.
It's funny about Jalen Hurts. He's obviously really, really good. And I said this before, it reminds me a little of Dak that I loved the intangibles more than the tangibles initially. But then all of a sudden I watch him and I'm like, yeah, I like the tangibles too. But he's hurt. And if you look at graphs post-injury, he's not throwing to the right. And he has lost his touch on deep balls. So though we've talked about Mahomes' injury, my feeling is Jalen's is worse. He's just tough, covering it up, and it's not getting out. He's not throwing the ball to the right. Well, Spags, he's been in this league forever.
He knows.
He knows.
If we know that, he knows that.
Yeah, and so my takeaway is, I don't know. You watch all the film. Does it look, and you had Eagle games this year, a lot, right? So it does feel like the touch, even his underneath stuff, Greg, feels short. The ball dies just a tad.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's completely fair. I think the question we have to ask is he hasn't done it in a high volume, right? They haven't been in that kind of shootout. Their path here to the Super Bowl has been relatively light, right? They beat up on New York in the second half. They just get into a handoff run game, and then we all know what happened in the NFC Championship where, they didn't even have to really operate in the second half because San Francisco couldn't attempt a forward pass.
Right.
So the path to getting here as far as Jalen Hurts being forced to play quarterback, to play from the pocket, I don't think is a knock on Jalen because we saw at times this year when they had to go score 30, they could, right? They came back from behind. They lost a close one in Dallas there on Christmas Eve, but they scored 30 some odd points. He can do it. He just hasn't done it since the injury happened. So I think there is a little bit of an unknown, and that's why I think Kansas City, if you're Spags, I want to find out. I know the kid can do it. He's an MVP candidate for a reason. He's a fantastic player. Is it a product of the injury that he's not doing it, or is it the product of the fact that they're blowing everybody out and they're not asking him to do it? I think Super Bowl Sunday, if I'm Spags, I'm putting eighth guy in the box. I'm stopping the run, and I'm saying, go ahead, Jalen Hurts. Beat me.
Yeah, J-Mac and I talked about that. There's a sense that this is what Philadelphia does and will do, and my takeaway is I think it's easy. Everybody is the complexity of Philadelphia's offense, but if the quarterback's hurt, it's much less complex. Make him throw.
Yeah, I think you make him throw. I think the injury, honestly, just from talking to people over there, I think he's okay. I don't think they consider him at all limited. I think all the RPO stuff, all the zone reads, all the design quarterback runs, I don't think we're going to see him really sliding and giving himself up like we did there kind of between that last game in the regular season against New York and then the divisional round. So I think that was protecting, just you don't want a setback. I think Sunday, it's all bets are off.
Okay, so Kansas City, this worries me. They got 4 young guys in the back end of the defense. Didn't hurt them against Cincinnati. It's different playing at Arrowhead or playing in an AFC championship and the Super Bowl. Yep. Again, you can go back to your Carolina team. Young players in this spot. Now, sometimes they don't know what they don't know. Would you be a little concerned they get overwhelmed, those Chiefs rookies?
Yeah, I think I think they have the advantage that the defensive coordinator, Spags, he's been around forever, right? They got some good veterans on that group who've played big-time games. Frank Clark, one of the most effective pass rushers, Chris Jones. So they have some guys who've been there, especially on the defensive side of the ball, including the coach. So I think there will be some nerves, but I'll tell you, when I went back and watched that game, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, this really good pass. Now, the offensive line was in shambles, so remove that. That's a very different animal than what they're going to face against this Philly offensive line. But as far as their plan in the back end of what they did to Jamar Chase was very complicated. They're bracketing guys. They're playing 2 over 1. They're playing 3 over 2. Like what Spags was able to implement from a pass coverage standpoint, not really worried about the run game as much with Joe Burrow or him escaping the pocket. They executed it at a really high level. And then you throw in that Snead gets hurt in the first quarter.
And now he's back.
Which is huge. So now there's 4 rookies out there playing time between corner and safety, and they did a great job. Now, there's some carryover that they can bring, on true 3rd and longs, true passing downs, where you got to stop Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. I think they bring some of that from the AFC game into this week. The difference being, if you want to play 2 high shells, you want to play deep safeties, man all over, someone's got to account for Jalen Hurts. And somebody's got to account for this offensive line in the run game. You can't just play light boxes all game unless you're up by 2 scores in the second half. Like, everything comes back to what is the style of game and what is the score.
Greg Olsen with Kevin Burkhardt. Fantastic year. Super Bowl 57 begins at 1 Eastern, game at 6:30 Eastern. Congrats on a great year, buddy. Crush it.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
It all kicks off Super Bowl Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.